What's up everyone, it's a Knife Star here, and today I'm going to be doing a full review on the Spyderco Sage 5 Lightweight. So I will throw up a couple of quick size comparisons so I don't waste too much time with that, but the overall important specs about this is we have a blade length of right at 3 inches and then a weight of right at 2.7 ounces. And a lot of people got really upset about that because the regular Sage 5 is just a little bit heavier. It's just a little bit heavier than this Sage 5 Lightweight. And I personally agree with them. I don't think it should have been called the Sage 5 Lightweight because it's only 13% lighter than the Sage 5. But still, it is a very light knife, and a lot of people that put a bad taste in their mouth about this knife. But I mean, it's 2.7 ounces for a 3-inch blade, and that will be appealing to a whole lot of people. And so the quick anatomy, I guess you could say, of this knife, if you just want to get in, get out, and go on with your life, this blade is S30V. It's got a black FRN handle. It runs on a compression lock. It has got this leaf blade shape. The pocket clip is a wire pocket clip, left hand and right hand friendly in the tip up position. It runs on a compression lock. I think I already said that, but it is made out of the Taichung, Taiwan plant, and it goes for about $120. So for the looks of this knife, basically how they've held up over the time. So this knife has been a definite user for me, and it was probably one of the first knives I've ever gotten where I just buy it, basically get it, stick it right in my pocket, and go to use with it. A lot of knives I would kind of like look at and play with for maybe a couple days, and then I'll finally start using them, but this knife was a straight up user from the start. So there are some scratches on this blade, and that's one thing about a satin finish. When it's just this vertical belt satin, and then you get one horizontal scratch, that thing is so visible and very hard to not see. And one thing from the factory is, let me try and get this on camera. Can you see it there right above my thumbnail? There's a little bit of a nick in that blade, and that is actually not from me. It was from originally, like first when I opened this knife, and my guess is that when someone was running it on the belt grinder or whatever, they kind of slipped up maybe. I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure Spyderco uses machines when they do that, so I don't know if a machine just maybe crapped out for a minute. I'm not entirely sure. But there is a little bit of a nick from the factory, and this knife is a user, so it's not that big of a deal to me. But if this knife was going to be a safe queen for me, if I had only bought $20 knives in the past and I splurged on this $120 knife, that would be a little bit frustrating to me. And one more thing about the looks, I wish that Spyderco would come out with more colors for these FRN models in the future. I don't know if they don't do that with Taichung, but I know with the Seki City factory, they have the Dragonfly, the Endura, the Delica, and they have tons of colors for you, and you don't have to buy a sprint run with a new steel to get a different color. You know, you can just get like a gray VG10 Delica or a blue VG10 Delica. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to get like a Maximet VG or a Maximet blue Delica in order to get the handle color scale of blue. And it's not that big of a deal, but I feel like this knife would be a lot more appealing if someone could get it in their favorite color. And I doubt that a lot of people's favorite configuration is a black handle with a satin blade. It's just very boring. Does it look bad? No. But does it look good? Not really. And one thing about this knife is that it looks kind of like a normal knife, which is one thing that you don't really hear from people when they talk about Spydercos. A lot of Spydercos, if you've seen like the Para 3, the PM2, they have this huge thumb ramp here. Also, that new Spyderco made in Italy by that Italy knife maker, or Lion Steel, yes. That new Spyderco made by Lion Steel, it has this huge thumb ramp, and in my opinion, those just look ugly. And so this knife does not really have a big thumb ramp, and it just kind of looks like a normal knife, which I like. One other thing that I don't like about this looks from the factory is this and the PM2, they look over sharpened from the factory. Like, it looks like this blade started right at the end of this, what would that be, notch or ricasso, and then I just sharpened it, like I just took like a millimeter off the blade from sharpening it. Same with the PM2, I actually have sharpened this knife a lot, but it just looks ugly and over sharpened, and it actually is kind of hard to sharpen when you actually go to sharpening it. So it's one of those things I wish Spyderco would either like kind of knock this down a little bit, because a lot of times that ends up hitting your finger when you close it. This knife, it's not the case, but it just doesn't look very good in my opinion. So for the blade, and I've had some good with the blade, but I've also had some bad. So this blade is in S30V, and that is an overall good steel, and I have zero complaints with it. A lot of people get caught up in the Maximets, K390s, and 10Vs of the world, but they gotta realize that some good old S30V is nothing to be mad about. So if you look right there, that blade is 11.5 thousandths, 12 thousandths. Oh wow, we just thickened way up. About 14 thousandths behind the edge. And then up here, let me get it. Oh man, I cannot get a good measurement. 15 thousandths, 14 thousandths right there. And so it's one of those things where this grind is excellent, or no, let me rephrase that. This thinness behind the edge is excellent from the factory, and I really do enjoy that. A lot of Spyderco knives, like your PM2, they might be good cutters, but they're about 20 thousandths behind the edge, so I would like to see Spyderco's thin that out even more, like they did with this knife. Now, would I like every single knife from Spyderco to be 9 thousandths behind the edge? Yes, I would, but I feel like that is a little bit unreasonable to ask for, and I'm glad that, I don't know if they're making improvements, but I'm glad that I am getting knives that are thinner behind the edge than 20 thousandths. So an issue with this grind from the factory, or mainly the edge from the factory, is it was a fatigued edge. Now you might get a Spyderco and you might just do some S-cuts through some phone book paper because their factory edges are very sharp. I actually whittled hair with this factory edge, and I'm gonna admit this, I've never whittled a hair with my edges from sharpening. You know, I did sharpen this knife, I got my best edge, I probably could have whittled a hair, but I went right to use with it, but I'm not gonna make any excuses. Spyderco's factory edge has been better than any edge that I've ever produced, and that's pretty good on them, and I can really respect them for that because I feel like their factory edges have really improved. Now, my issues with that is this edge was fatigued from the factory. Basically, they did not cool this blade down in grinding, and so what happens is I would cut cardboard with this knife, and then I would see chips in the blade. And cardboard is not something that gives you chips in your blade. You know, maybe if you're popping a really reinforced zip tie, that might give you a little bit of a roll or a chip in your blade, but not something like cardboard, unless it's just absurdly thick and maybe dirty cardboard. I don't really know. But this knife should not have chipped when it did. And you might be screaming at me, well, S30V is chippy. It's not that chippy. Nothing is chippy enough to chip in cardboard unless it is just a very, very poorly heat-treated steel. Just an absurdly wrong heat-treated steel, I guess. I'm not entirely sure about the details on heat treat, and I don't want to say more. I don't want to act like I know more than I actually do, but I do know that this edge was burnt, and so I have sharpened it twice, and I think I removed most of the fatigue steel from this portion of the blade, but I actually sharpened this part less on Spyderco's because it's a bad habit of mine, so there is still a little bit of fatigue steel, and I feel a chip right there, right where my fingernail is. I feel a chip in the blade right there, and I could get that out hitting it on my Spyderco ceramic stone, maybe slightly increasing that angle and hitting it on each side a couple times, and I could get that out, and I'll probably do that after I record this video, but it's one of those things where it shouldn't have chipped, and I wish that Spyderco would. I know it's kind of a lot to ask for them to wet grind, but so many companies these days are having fatigued edges from the factory. Everyone should just be a little bit more like Chris Reeve. They wet grind here, and this knife has its full capabilities of S35VN right when you open it out of the box, and they also have a good heat treatment. So basically what I'm trying to say is I'd rather have a Chris Reeve knife in S35VN with an edge that I don't have to sharpen 3 times out of the box than a knife in 10V or Maximet that I have to sharpen a lot of times out of the box. So it's just one of those things where I wish that this edge was good, or it was a sharp edge from the factory, but in use it wasn't that good. So enough about the blade. I've probably talked about that a little bit too much. I need to say one more thing. This blade shape is excellent, and this leaf blade shape is so good. Definitely one of my favorite blade shapes. It just got this flat right here and a little bit of belly, and it just works so good. So for the fit and finish of this knife, it is pretty dang on centered. It's right there. It's got let me check blade play. So I feel no blade play right here, but also when I grip back here, I feel, I don't know if you guys could hear that because I don't know if you guys could hear that, but there is a little bit of blade play, and I think that is as of a result of loose tolerances, because when I like push in here, I'm kind of pushing those washers and the blade all together, making it not have blade play. So it's one of those things that it doesn't mind me because it's obviously not that much blade play, but it might mind those perfectionists out there who need it perfectly centered with a perfectly drop shutty action with zero blade play. And so onto the lockup of this knife. I have no lock rock. This compression locks looks like it is done fine, and it actually has some pretty good action. I'll talk about that right now. So you can thumb flick it, you can Spidey flick it, and it actually drops shut for you. So one thing that is a little bit scary with that is one time I was holding the knife, I closed it, and it ended up like that. And that's what happens when you tilt it a little bit too much, because you're holding that compression lock a little bit more. So it hits the base and then it comes back out. And I put it into my pocket like this and I didn't know it. Luckily when I felt it like that in my pocket because it felt really wide. So I was able to catch it before I might have accidentally pulled it out. But it's one of those things where compression locks, a lot of people really like them, but they say that there is no safety hazard because your fingers are out of the blade. But if it's so smooth that it bounces back like that, that is very well a safety hazard, and you could very well get cut for that. I guess I'm just going to keep saying very well constantly. But for the ergos of this knife, and this has been an overall positive, there's one negative though. One thing I want to talk about, this FRN, a lot of people just say, I hate FRN because they hear everyone else say that. But FRN is one of those things that I am not opposed to, and I actually kind of like it. And this Taichung FRN is great. They have this kind of honeycomb pattern on here, and that's not really sharp at all, It does give you grip if you really grip down on it and just like hold it very tight, but it just feels smooth to the touch, and it still provides traction, but it's not like hurting your hand at all. It's not like super heavily textured G10 or anything. And one thing about this Taichung FRN, it is knocked down on the inside there and chamfered. One thing about my Para 3 from Golden, Colorado, or Para 3 Lightweight, is this FRN was not knocked down on the inside, and that actually provided an entire hot spot for my hand when I gripped it like this. So what I had to do, I took the whole thing apart, I got like a ceramic rod, and I basically just sanded that down. I would not suggest using sandpaper or a Dremel, because you could very well deform the look of it, or maybe if you use a Dremel or maybe like a whole belt sander, it could kind of knock away that FRN and melt it just because it's injection molded plastic. But overall, ergonomics, the FRN is great. I really like this pinch grip right here. And I really like that because I honestly probably do 60 to 70% of my cuts like this. I don't really know why. It's one of those things where a lot of people get a knife, they're like, oh, it feels good like that, feels good like that, feels good like that. And then when they go to use it, you grip it like this. You don't grip it in a regular hammer grip to open a box. Like, that just doesn't really make any sense. It's one of those things where this knife is comfortable in a bunch of different ways because the ergonomic lines are fairly simple to begin with. And I wish that Spyderco would just do away with this jimping altogether, because I have no worries that this knife is going to fall out of my hand. Let's say I was stabbing a tree or something and this had no jimping on it. My finger would have to slip off the front and my middle finger would have to slip off this groove right here in order for my whole hand to go up onto this blade. Maybe my pointer finger slips off and gets nicked by that edge, but I'd rather have that, I'd much rather have that happen than my whole blade get hit. And I really just have no worries that this knife will fall out of my hand. And like we saw with the Capara, that knife has no jimping on it. And it's one of those things where I wish that they would keep doing that, because their jimping, it's not bad, but on a satin finish, it's just not really knocked down all that well on the edges. So sometimes when you're pushing down hard on it, it can get uncomfortable in your hand. And another part about uncomfort is this compression lock gives me a hot spot. I was gripping it in this hammer grip, kind of like this, or maybe like this, I can't really remember. But I was cutting like 2 or 3 layers of cardboard, so I was really pushing down hard. And when this blade resistance, the resistance of the blade is being pushed back and you're trying to push forward through it, that just makes it very uncomfortable in your hand. And if you have a Sage 5 lightweight right now, do that with your knife and just look at your hand. And as you can see, if you look at that right there, did I cut myself doing that? No, that was from flipping a ballet song a couple of days ago. I was worried. I was like, well, that compression lock is very well a hot spot if you get cut by it. But for the, I've already touched on ergonomics. One more thing about it is this thumb ramp here is not very defined, I guess you could say. With the Para 2 and the Para 3, one thing that's a little bit annoying about it is it's just such a huge thumb ramp. Let me get out the Para 3 because it's even a better example. like just look at how big that thumb ramp is. And so when I grip it in this choked up grip, this is not really comfortable to me at all. Like, just look at my thumb. My thumb wants to be free and go right about there, but it's just completely locked back and my whole wrist is kind of canted to the right. And it's just one of those things where that does not make sense for ergonomics. And I always used to say, even before I got this or my native, that I would like my thumb to go, you know, maybe right about there. And this knife does that very nicely, and my thumb goes right there, and I have no problems with the ergonomics, or not the ergonomics in whole, but I have no problems with this choked up grip right here, and it feels great. So really quick on the carry of this knife, I have zero complaints. Like I said, 2.7 ounces, very lightweight, still has full metal liners, has this deep carry wire pocket clip that has some good retention on it. It's easy to pull out of the pocket. It goes in and out of the pocket nicely. I just have zero complaints. I've carried this in gym shorts. I've carried this in jeans. It works fine in anything, and I'm really happy with the carry of this knife. So for the action, I already touched on that, so I'll go straight to the value. This knife goes for about $120. I actually got it for $80 because I had rewards for a retailer that I use. And yeah, that's a great deal for this knife. I would love if Spyderco could make this knife, you know, maybe at $100, because that would appeal to a whole lot more people. Because I could see this knife being a knife that someone maybe gets the tenacious and they don't want to move all the way up to like a PM2 or a Para 3 or a Spyderco Shaman. And so they maybe get a knife in this price range, the $100 to $120 price range. And I think that this knife would make an excellent candidate for that. And the price, I don't think that there's any overpriced, or it might be a little bit too overpriced, and a lot of people aren't going to like these FRN scales for that price, because a lot of people are like, plastic over $100, like what is that? You know, everyone can think what they want to think, but I think that this knife, the price of it is fair. At least, you know, people might disagree, but I guess that's going to do it for the video. The attention to detail, just things I want to point out again. I really like the full metal liners with the little bit of skeletonization on them. I like how the inside of this FRN is knocked down, and I like this little patch where the wire clip sits on. So that's going to do it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry that this video is a little bit long, which I know all of mine are. It's just I feel like I could either give you guys a little bit and it wouldn't be that good of a video, or I could go into a lot of detail like I did here and make it a lot better video and more enjoyable for me to, you know, make, and hopefully for you guys to watch. But oh, sorry, my voice just went out. I understand a lot of times I won't have the time to sit down and watch a 17-minute video, so I guess I apologize for that. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys in the next one.